Oh, David.
Yeah.
I believe we're live. I think we're live. Yeah, we live. Yeah.
Hey.
Good evening to all these amazing, brilliant leaders on this line in this Zoom space, this conversation. Hello out there to social media land. If you're watching us from Facebook or Instagram, we're glad you joined us. This is night 2 of a call for healing. This is a very intimate conversation with some amazing individuals. You can see there's so much diversity in this space. And we're going to get started here officially in just a few minutes. We're looking at the time and it's 29 minutes after the hour. And we want to keep our commitment to start right on time. I just wanted to take the opportunity and say, if you did not see the inaugural conversation last night, whoa. Now, I won't say you missed it, but you kind of missed it. But you can go back and watch the replay. I would encourage you to do that. But if you're joining us tonight for the first time, thank you so much for taking the opportunity, whether it's morning for you or whether it's evening for you. We really appreciate you being a part of this conversation. Again, as you look around the room, you see so many faces. You see faces of brilliant individuals, faces who have made the commitment to actually share their story about how they grew up, share the story about how they have experienced racism and injustice in their lives. And so it really, really is. And I said this last night, and it's still just sticking with me. When we take the opportunity to share our story, what impact it has on the lives of other people, especially when we do it in a very authentic way. And what I feel so honored to be in this space because you're looking at 9, 10, including our gracious host, Tierra, individuals who said yes to being vulnerable to the world. And that takes courage that a lot of people just don't have, or courage that a lot of people just don't choose to take. And so I applaud every single one of our thought leaders on the call tonight. And listen, it's 8:30. I am not going to prolong the time because while I'll be behind the scenes and interacting with our social media audience, I'm going to turn it over to Tierra, Destiny Reed, our gracious host. And again, I'm Valerie Paul, and so I'm so happy to be co-moderating tonight. But let's jump into this conversation, shall we? Let me see. Our host, can you say, hey, Tierra?
Hey, guys.
Hello.
Let me see those hands, guys. I need to see your hands. Good energy, good energy. Guys, yes, it is officially time to kick off day 2. And Valerie, thank you so much for an amazing introduction. And welcome to all of the friends and our community that are joining us live tonight. Please know that Valerie is watching your comments. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask, because we are prepared to answer those questions as well. Just to give you an overview, if you did happen to miss last night, our format tonight's a little bit different. What we're going to do tonight is take a deep dive into the hearts and minds of a few of our specific thought leaders, and we'll continue with the remainder thought leaders tomorrow. We are going to kick off tonight's discussion with Mr. David Steele. And David, I'm just so excited. I couldn't wait for us to come together tonight for this conversation. In all transparency, I want everyone to know that I received a very long, heartfelt text this morning from Dave. And Dave, I actually want to allow you to share with the audience what that text message said and the intention behind that text message.
Good evening, Tara. Good evening, Valerie, and everybody else on the panel. It's an honor and a privilege to be here this evening. I I won't be able to remember exactly what I put in the text because I was typing with my thumbs straight from my heart. But I can tell you I was at the time overwhelmed, as I have been since the first invitation to be a part of this group, with an awareness that there's a big part of me that doesn't feel like I belong on this panel. I'm grateful to be included, but I feel like our nation is at a really crucial juncture right now. And it's an extraordinary opportunity to listen to voices that have not always had a platform. And I don't think I shared this with you, but even yesterday evening before the session over dinner, I was talking with my wife about this, and I said, you know, I really don't belong on this. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, this is a time for people that look like me to be quiet and listen. And my daughter, Savannah Grace, who is 8 years old, said, Daddy, white people caused this problem. They need to try and fix it. And she's 8, and I didn't even know she was paying attention to what we were talking about. And that was what gave me a bit of an inspiration to participate last night, and the desire to be here, to be fully present and to listen and to be constructive in any way that I can. But I really do want to honor you and everyone that's participating this evening, and to say that I'm sorry and that I know we can do better.
Thank you so much for that, Dave, and thank you for your heart. Thank you for your transparency and the intention to heal, the intention to connect, the intention to listen and understand. I believe that my response to you, it was very short. I wanted you to know that I heard your heart, but I told Dave that I wanted us to wait until tonight to have the conversation live, and that I had several questions after listening last night, and that I wanted to remain in this space of authenticity and have a very transparent conversation. When I listen to you, Dave, and I love the fact that we don't have a pre-existing relationship. I think it makes it even more so authentic. And my questions just come from a place of curiosity. And so my response to you, while brief, really touched on, you know, someone that decides to heal or transform or change must first make that decision. And after making the decision, you must acknowledge your role. And in acknowledging your role, that takes power. And in acknowledging that role, if someone is going to change their life, change their behavior, begin to change their thoughts, then there are different emotions that are going to come up for you. And if it's going to be authentic, in my opinion, then the healing process does require self-forgiveness as well. And so sometimes when I'm listening, and reading things that you've written, I do hear the guilt, I hear shame, the pain, and you touched on it a little bit tonight. And then I don't know if anyone else noticed this, and it could just be me. You almost hesitated to use the word privilege when you were. I don't know if anyone else noticed it, but we're going to talk about that tonight. But I love your heart. So, did you want to respond before we jump into my first question?
I do. First of all, thank you for being so gracious with me. I'm all about talking about privilege, and to the extent that I can, putting that privilege at the disposal of people who can help me use that to make things right. So, and you're right that there's a big part of me that wants to wallow in some negative emotions, but first of all, I don't want to put my emotions at the center of any of this. So it makes me uncomfortable for us to talk too much about that. But to the extent that that conversation could be helpful to other people, I'm happy to do that. I don't want to be defensive or to in any way try to protect myself through this, because I want to put myself at the disposal of people who can walk on top of me to something better.
Well, Dave, I appreciate that. And one perspective that I would like for you to consider is that someone stepping up, such as yourself, there are going to be people who can relate to you and some people who can only relate to you. And even if they have a difference of opinion, can relate to the lifestyle, can relate to the background. And some people who believe that that's okay and they choose to continue to believe the way you've chosen to shift away from. And so while some people may choose to turn a blind eye to those that they can't relate to, you may touch the hearts and minds of people who feel that, I'm curious, if he believed what I believe, what caused the change? And that's one of my questions for you. When did the shift start to occur for you, and why? What triggered that?
Well, a couple of things. First, I promise not to preach. I will leave that to Pastor Kim, because I know she can do it much better. But in I believe it's 2 Corinthians, maybe around the 11th chapter, the Apostle Paul says he's only going to brag about things that make him look awful. And that's kind of the story that I like to tell. Is ultimately, I think, going to make me look awful, but it might help us all make some forward progress. So it would be more dramatic if I could tell you that I was raised by Klan members, or that our dining room table was the Confederate battle flag. We didn't have that. I was raised in a family that I think loved everybody. And even my grandfather that I talked about last night, I never saw him be unkind. I never thought I perceived hate. And I will tell you that when my children were born, they're 8 and 6 now, I literally argued with the nurses, 2 nurses, and with some other professional at the hospital, because I refused to have them classified as a race. Because I was so committed to what I thought would be progress. And I thought that by designating my kids as white, that would be a step backwards for racial equity. And I have, years ago, I used Malcolm X as a textbook in my classes. I marched with Hosea Williams in Forsyth County back in the mid 80s. In short, I didn't think I was the problem. But if you look at Dr. King's letter from the Birmingham jail, he says at one point he's less concerned about the Klan than he is about white moderates who are patient. And as many times as I've read that and I've used that as a text in class, I never knew he was talking about me. And a few weeks ago, my wife were sitting on the porch and we were talking about the events of that day, which included having witnessed a horrific murder on a sidewalk by an agent of the state. And it was not the first time we've seen that. But it was what we were talking about. And my daughter, I guess a theme of this evening is how observant she is. She came over to us. I didn't think she was listening. She said, "What are you talking about?" And my first impulse, Tiara, was to say, to brush her off somehow and say, "We'll talk about it later." And a voice in my head my friend Life, who's on this call, he doesn't have the option to not talk to his kids about that. And my friend Stacy and my friend Dion and my friend Kylia, they don't have the option to not talk to their kids about that. And you want to talk about privilege? That's what privilege is the option to say, you know what, we're not going to talk about that. Privilege is the option to argue with the nurse and say, you don't get to label my child. And so what I realized, and what has been the epiphany, and it's not, maybe not a dramatic turning point, but in my life it sure is that being not a racist is not enough. And just as Dr. King said, being not a racist makes you part of the problem, made me part of the problem. And so I thought for years and years and years, in fact, my whole life, I've thought I was part of the solution. But I am now raising my children to be anti-racist. And I know it's a long answer. I will shut up here, but I appreciate the opportunity to share this. But to me, that's kind of been the turning point, is some very simple examples that utterly humiliated me, but showed me what the world is like and what my role has been like in it.
Wow. Well, Dave, thank you so much for your heart, your transparency, and for, yes, recognizing and realizing we don't get to ignore, and we don't get to talk about it later when we witness, and it's happened for hundreds of years, the murders of innocent people, out of respect for that man you reference. I have to say his name.
George Floyd.
Mr. George Floyd. We have to. And there are many George Floyds. And I appreciate you recognizing that and stepping up to have that conversation with your daughter. And I thank you again for being here tonight, and listening to you. It sounds like when I talked to you initially before we came on, I heard you say very clearly that you had been a racist. When I hear you tonight, I hear, while not being a quote unquote conscious racist, my silence was still a problem. Am I understanding that correctly, Dave?
Yes, ma'am, you absolutely are. And I think it's, when I think about my sphere of influence, the people with whom I interact on a regular basis, I think we are frequently guilty. I was guilty of this, of not grasping the significance of the difference between an individual and a system. Mm-hmm. And too often we have taken a false sense of comfort in what we think is our own purity of heart or our goodness of intentions. Mm-hmm. But if we are not actively dismantling the system, mm-hmm. then we are sustaining the system.
Correct.
And that's the reality.
Exactly. So I have two questions that come up for me when I hear that. Is one, what actions are you taking specifically? We know what your profession is, but what different actions, what conscious actions are you taking specifically to move the needle? That's one. And can you share a specific behavior or experience where you did display racism and now you would not do that? You would mm-hmm. do something different. I was talking to my mom about it today, and my mom is like, I really wonder if anyone would share how the conversations happen. Someone that is growing up in a racist environment, what are those conversations in private versus when you are interacting, at work and we're being politically correct? Can you just kind of delve into that for me? Because I definitely appreciate your honesty tonight.
Sure. Well, on the last topic, mm-hmm. I just within the last several weeks, I very quickly accumulated a very long list of examples of ways that I have embodied a racist system in my own thinking. And this is horribly embarrassing because I've taught courses on unconscious bias. I have led students through privilege walks. Mm. And I think I could have on paper passed a test, but in real life, I don't think I was passing the test. Mm-hmm. And I just know of too many examples when I have perpetuated the system that assumes that if we treat everyone the same, that mm-hmm. that is somehow going to get us to justice, mm-hmm. and it's not. Mm-hmm. And I would even go so far, and I don't want to offend people, and occasionally I have with this observation, but I think the golden rule is very problematic to us right now for people who look like me, because there are a lot of people who may have good hearts, but if they're going through life treating other people the way they want to be treating, they're missing out on the fact that that obscures privilege. Somebody with privilege wants to be treated a certain way that's not necessarily going to work for everybody else. And so just that relentless commitment to equity and understanding that treating everybody the same in the face of generations, hundreds of years of inequity, treating everyone the same is horrific. It's absolutely horrible, and it's not going to get us anywhere. And so that, that's what I was trying to do by raising my children not to see race. I thought that was going to make the world better, and it wasn't, and it won't.
Dave, 2 quick questions before we shift to our next thought leader. You have opened my mind to so much. I'm processing, and I will be in prayer about how to navigate. This is very organic, and so we're not going to pretend that the conversation is over, but all of us are doing an amazing job at definitely supporting the objective and intention for this conversation. And it is to heal, grow, connect, and learn through listening. And if we're unable to listen and provide a safe space for hard conversations, then we're not ready for change. And so there are some people with megaphones who are unable to exercise emotional intelligence. And I am a student right now of emotional intelligence. And I have to just thank, she's not with us tonight, Erica Bishop. Her book launches today, Master Your Emotions, Master Your Life. We would not be having this conversation without those skills. And so I want to offer that resource out to anyone watching to look that up on Amazon, Master Your Emotions, Master Your Life, because what I realize is it's not necessarily about the one suggestion I can make, but it's about the ability to even come to the table with people I may not agree with for change. So I appreciate you standing in your truth and really modeling what that looks like for someone to say, hey, I've been in denial. I was wrong. I was silent. That has to change if I'm going to stand behind what I'm teaching or what I say that I want to teach my daughter. What does this look like in the privacy of our home? What does this look like, in my profession? So I want to close with a question, and then I just feel like this won't be our last conversation. When you hear Black Lives Matter, what does that mean to you?
Oh, wow. Thank you for that question. And if this is our last conversation, I'll be very sad.
It won't be.
Black Lives Matter, I think, is a vital opportunity for people who think they are white, as Ta-Nehisi Coates says, to give a verbalization of the reality of our inequity and the absurdity of the all lives matter response is that willful ignorance that says treat everybody the same. And in the face of the reality that we know, that is an incredibly immoral response. And so when I hear that, and when I have the opportunity to affirm it and to say it with my children, and we've been at events in our community and had a chance to say that to each other and say it out loud, I think is just a very important thing for us to say. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, when Colin Kaepernick started his actions in 2016, I did not own that. I saw it and thought it was okay, but I didn't participate in it. I just observed it and approved from a distance. But I refuse to let that happen in another world now. That's something I want to be a part of. And the last thing I want to say is to go back to something Dr. Tong said last night when she lifted up the extent to which all of this impacts women in particular. In addition to white privilege, male privilege is devastating. And I hope that the lessons that we're learning now in the context of conversation about race we recognize how much of that also applies to gender. And we cannot be in the same place in 5 years talking about equity for women. So thank you for what you're doing in particular to lift up the voices of women.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dave. Powerful. And I promise you this won't be the last time you hear from me. I have to meet that 8-year-old baby girl of yours.
She has a 6-year-old brother who's pretty awesome too.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure the other thought leaders are just processing just like I am. So you guys feel free to type in the chat any thoughts or anything that you want me to digest later on as well. We're going to keep moving out of respect for time, and we're going to shift over to Miss Monique Russell. Hi, Monique.
Hey, Tiara.
How are you?
Oh, fabulous. This is so enriching.
It
What a
is.
powerful conversation.
It is. Monique, for those people who may just be joining us today and they didn't get to hear that introduction yesterday, could you just bring us into your world? We want to walk in your shoes for a moment because you talked about life as a Black woman, but not only as a Black woman, you really touched on colorism. You talked about self-love. And we talk about healing. Monique and I are still growing. This is a pretty new relationship. And so we're learning from each other, but a thread that connects us is the appreciation and respect for the healing process. Monique, I'm going to turn it over to you. And can you just bring us into the reality of your world right now and how you're navigating these conversations with the women that you work with specifically?
Sure. So, for those that weren't able to catch yesterday or are not familiar, so I grew up in the Bahamas, beautiful islands of the Bahamas, and I currently live here now in Atlanta. And I'm a mom. I have two boys, 20 and 14. I'm a wife. And in my coaching practice, I work with women in all walks, business and leadership roles. And as far as what we're facing right now, I guess I'll just say what I'm doing to navigate the conversation first is focus on self-love and self-care. Um, there's so much trauma that has been um, reawakened, I guess, opened old wounds. And so the feelings are much deeper right now. And we're seeing a lot of fatigue, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of anger, a lot of guilt, a lot of depression. And so what I'm doing in my conversations right now with women, Black women, is focused on self-care and self-love. Now is not the time if you're feeling depleted to be engaging in any type of conversation with anybody. This is my view. Anybody who doesn't understand. I don't have time for it. I'm not interested in it. Um, I want to focus on healing and restoring the Black woman right now. And for anybody that is curious, from a curious standpoint, if the cup is full, if the cup is at a point where, we can have that conversation in spaces like this that are healing conversations, then by all means, absolutely. But I've been advising women to commune, to find out more about their own history, their own heritage, understand why they feel the way they feel, just learning more about history. I didn't grow up in this country, but I was very much active in learning about this country, the history of this country, because the reality is there are views coming from the Caribbean towards Black Americans and not understanding that their fight is our fight. It's one fight. So from that angle, I'm encouraging people to make sure that they understand the backstory and that there is really no divide against Black people. It's just a fabrication. So, from an education standpoint, that's what I'm doing.
Mm,
From a healer
thank you so
standpoint.
much. Thank you for sharing. Monique, you mentioned serving and working with Black women. Do you coach and work with any white women?
I do. But the majority of the clients that I have, they are Black women.
Okay.
Black women come to me mainly, but I do work with white women too, and white men.
Have you had candid conversations regarding race with any of those white women?
The conversations we have has been around, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. How are you feeling? Um, I'm so upset about this that I wrote about it. And I wasn't in a space for that, to be honest with you. I just was not in a space for that. Um, for me to begin helping someone else to see why their view was wrong, or why, even if they didn't do something directly or felt like they did something directly, I wasn't in a space for that. I'm working in emotional intelligence. I'm a communications coach, but I'm also human.
Mhm.
And so, in order for me to have those types of conversations, I had to make sure that I was in a place, and I said it, that I'm not in a place to have these conversations right now. But surely, here are some materials that you can review. Here are some materials that you can read. Here are some materials that you can explore. And that's been my position. But as far as deep, really deep conversations, no, we haven't had those types of conversations.
Monique, thank you so much for your honesty. Thank you for putting some additional tough conversations out on the table right now. Thank you for acknowledging and being the voice of so many women, um, whether you're in leadership or not, who are learning, starting to honor their emotions, emotions that have been suppressed for years, allowing them to come up. How many people have gone to the workplace and the mask was required from the time you hit the parking lot until the time you got back to your vehicle? And now that the conversation is being welcomed in some workplaces, because some people have communicated to me that they're still feeling the microaggression. So it's like, well, do you really want us to talk about it, or do we just want to read a company-wide statement that was sent out? So there is a lot happening right now. However, I did have a conversation with some of the white women that I work with, and I wanted to get you touched on it a little bit. But when you think about a woman that is sincere, okay, we're not going to talk about the person that is, you know, talking about it now that it's publicly acceptable and it's the thing to do. I want you to envision the woman that has had your back, if any. I have. So I'm speaking from a place where I have had that friend, and that friend did not look like me. So when that friend comes to me and says, is there anything I can do? Or am I damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't? What's your response to that? Are you the woman that says, I don't know what it is for you. I don't want anything from you. I don't need anything. I need time to process how I feel because I don't know what I want. And we'll get to life later, but life says, well, there's so many different issues. There's so many different problems. So my question is, for that person that is genuine and sincere, is there anything that you do suggest or that you would want to see, any behaviors, any actions as a Black woman, if one of your clients respects you, admires you, and sincerely wants to do something to show support? Is there anything she can do, or is
Of
that
course.
not the conversation?
There's, I feel there's a lot that can be done
Okay.
for those. And I will just say, again, it doesn't matter whether the intention is good or not, whether you have my back or not. If I'm in my space and I'm not ready, I'm not ready. I don't need to get ready because you're ready. Give me my space. That's it. That's it. But for those who are curious, those who really want to help, and can acknowledge that, okay, I'm in a space. I'm in a space and I'm not ready for it. Acknowledge it. Be there to support. When I came out of that space and
Mm-hmm.
I had more clarity around it,
Right.
then yeah, of course, there are things that you can do. You can use your platform to bring awareness to these topics. Don't just sit in silence because we can't do it alone. Like Dave was saying, the choice to not engage or the choice to not share, a lot of us don't have that option. So use your platform, use your voice, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable. I've had some of the women open up more of their network. That's what you do, right? That's what you do. You open up your network. You say, "Hey, I know this person. This is what she does. I know that person. This is what they do." When I talk about liking Black and loving Black, right? Black likes, the Black loves. When you love somebody, you think about anything that you can do to help them, and whether that is sending them some alkaline water, sending them some oils, because that right now the stress is high and the tension is high, and they might need a COVID-free masseuse to come to their house or something like that. Anything to help that person you love or care about. I think of when I lost my aunt and she was diagnosed with cancer, and this is very much like a cancer. You don't bring negative talk around her. You don't say, "Well, Auntie, what can I do for you?" while you're sitting up in the hospital. You just do it. You bring some meals, you bring some positive music, you talk about what's going on, you give prayers, you just do it. I can't expect my aunt who's going through chemo to tell me what I need her to do or what she needs me to do. So in the whole progression of conversation, I think there needs to be that acknowledgement and ownership. I can't be responsible for it all. I can't be processing my trauma and helping you help me process my trauma, right? And that's just what I feel.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Monique. You put some interesting things out on the table. Something that really stands out for me, and I definitely live by it, is honoring those true and raw emotions, honoring that space. As social as I am, I can be a hermit, and only people who know me or have been connected to me longer than a few months, it becomes very obvious quickly. And I do it unapologetically because self care is so critical. And that's what you're speaking to, reconnecting with ourselves at the core, our spirit, our emotions, and not putting ourselves in a position to necessarily begin training and teaching and coaching on what this reality has been for hundreds of years. And I thank you so much for just really highlighting that and sharing that, because there are people who really haven't learned how to honor their emotions, which is why I spoke about that earlier, let alone some people are not self-aware enough to know what they need during grief and trauma. Life, things that happen in life teach us more about ourselves. And so I thank you for sharing that. Um, I think where we disagree is that I would expect someone who does not live my reality to know what I need and just do it. I think that's why people are asking, because you show up and think you're helping and then your head is bitten off because you used the wrong word. So I'm like, I have to definitely show both sides of that because I've seen it. So for me personally, I respect the person that is willing and they're genuine. If it's a facade and if it's just something you're doing for a trend and you want a hero cookie, or you want to make a best friend, and it's not sincere, you're more of the problem. In my opinion, you're more of the problem. I would rather you just stay out of the way and just stay to yourself and do you and learn and be authentic in that process. But I am sensitive to someone who doesn't know, because I reach out to people like you and my mentors whenever I'm entering something that's unfamiliar. I think back to when I entered corporate America. I was just in a space that felt so foreign because I'm so me, right? I'm authentic. I'm like, what is this? And that's how Leslie Briscoe Andrews and I connected, right? And so it was almost like, even if I want to try to do something, I want to be helpful, I didn't know what that looked like in that setting or environment because it was different, but my heart was good. And so what I do hear you saying, and where we agree, is that if your heart and your intentions are good, right, you really can't go wrong when you think about humanity. And I love that you related it to illness, sickness, being in the hospital, grief, trauma. When you think about these things, how do you care for anyone you love, right? How do you care for someone you love? You may not call, like you said, someone with chemo and say, well, what can I do for you? But it takes knowing them at the same time to know what that should look like. So if I just met Rebecca and she doesn't know and she's reaching out with sincerity, I love that you have given women and men who are watching the words to say, now is not the time, but I will circle around if that time comes. That's what I hear from you. And I honor that and I respect that. Monique, before we close, is there anything else that you would like to share um, as it pertains to your world right now, your life, navigating the tough conversations, Black Lives Matter, these statements? How are you navigating, especially as a mom? What does that look like?
Mm. So, yeah, I mean, I have two boys, and we have had very long conversations, very, very long conversations. And to be honest with you, like when I raised them, we were, they went to primarily white schools, and my kids were, the minority in their groups and their ages. And for a long time I felt like, in some ways, like, Dave, like, you know what, I'm not gonna expose them to these types of things. I don't want their mindset to be clouded, thinking that being Black is being inferior. In fact, I went on the offensive, and I'm like, if there's gonna be any brainwashing or washing of the brain, it's gonna be done by me, and it's going to be sort of offensive on Black love and Black pride and Black everything. And in doing that, I do recognize that, yeah, they've developed that love for themselves. There's been times where they didn't feel like that. I remember one time my youngest son, he was in pre-K, and he was one of two Black students in his class. And he came home and he said he didn't want to play with the other guy. And I was like, why? And he said, because he's Black. And I was like, boy, you're Black. He was like, I'm not black. I'm not black. I'm like, you're black. And I said, wow. He wasn't even in kindergarten. And so I had to really go all out, like from the images in the home on the walls to the books to the coloring books to the black Jesus, everything, so that he could see more of himself. And when he got like a little cut on his leg, we were driving one day and he said, Mom, when this cut, it's scraped, when it scrapes and you see the skin peel off, and he said, when it grows back, I want this to grow back and be white. And I was like, where in the world did I go wrong? And my oldest one went through that for a period of time, but I'm proud to say that, he
Mhm.
really is in touch with himself right now. But what's going on right now in our world, we've had very long family conversations. And my youngest, he actually thinks that, that's not true. It's not real. Like, it doesn't exist because he hasn't been bombarded with those images or those stories or those views of him being inferior or different, and he hasn't encountered those situations where we've had to have the conversation that, okay, this could be because of your race. So I just want to say there are definitely times where I think, oh, what did I do? Am I not preparing them? Did I not prepare them well enough for the reality of the world?
Mhm.
Um, so that has gone back and forth. But as far as navigating now, we continue to have conversations. We continue
Mhm.
to share.
Monique, you and I will definitely be having more conversations. We've already talked about coming together. We've both been panelists on another platform, The Power of Perspective, and that was very beautiful and eye opening. And it's been a very authentic connection. And I thank you for tonight. I'm processing as well. I'm in that same space as a mom, and I thank you. I thank you so much for sharing. And I thank you for giving people who didn't have the words to set a healthy boundary for self care and self love, and not even knowing sometimes what we need. Because after last night's session, I was in tears. And I did reach for you, and your words did bring me comfort because I didn't even know. It was just overwhelming gratitude for everyone who said yes, and us being here to hear each other and share and grow. Um, it was beautiful, it was powerful, but the emotions that came up, yeah, I didn't have the words for it. And so I thank you for living what it is that you teach and modeling it and honoring that, even when we don't know what's next or we don't have the words to describe it. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Miss Rebecca Davidson. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello, Tiara.
How are you?
Super.
Rebecca, I saw you really connecting with Monique.
I did. I did. I have a background in hospice care. And so the grief process is actually something I understand. I've gone through a lot of grief and loss myself. And I feel that as a collective, we haven't even really begun to process our grief. And so to have that language pulled into this conversation, I think is very, very important. And I often say that grief is a very strange mistress. You're not in charge. And the emotions that you go through are going to ebb and flow. You're going to feel horrible. You're going to feel okay sometimes. And I think that boundaries are absolutely the best thing that you can be employing. Self-care, I think bringing those who are close to you closer is absolutely important. And, you know, it's not until the funeral that all of the people come around. And, you know, when you're actually in hospice with someone, or when you're recovering from the impact of the shock, it's your very, very closest people who are near you. And in that space of collective grief, you know, I think that's important to remember the layers of who gets to be around.
Thank you, Rebecca. Rebecca, you know, as I was processing last night, you spoke of being very aware of white privilege.
Mm-hmm.
You said that. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that, and when you became aware of it, and how you are navigating life now, if anything has changed? Because we were having a really in-depth conversation one-on-one, and you were raising some really interesting topics, but I was curious to hear, like, you are saying you lived white privilege, you're aware of it. Talk to me about that. When did you become aware of that?
I don't know that I knew that it was white privilege, but you know, in the realm of respectability politics, how we all craft ourselves to walk through the world in a way that makes us acceptable, not scary, not threatening. As someone who has been in same-sex relationship, I have the ability to pass as a straight person, should I choose to. And so that is because of this white skin. It's something that I can simply choose to walk through the world in a heteronormative way. And my privilege gives me that ability. And so the way that I conceive my white privilege is from a space of being different. It's from a space of how I can package myself to fit into the world, depending on what space that I'm in.
And I read some of the things that you've posted publicly. When Monique was speaking, you came to my mind with some of the suggestions she made. My question for you, Rebecca, is how are you using your sphere of influence right now to create change and to really be a support, and really raise awareness with all that's happening right now?
I think I shared yesterday that I was raised in a predominantly white environment. And because I'm different than the norm, you know, I always sought out people who were different from me. So I've always had
different. Are you talking about your sexual preference?
Or orientation, sexual orientation rather than preference. No, I'm just talking about people who don't fit in necessarily, you know. So I had the one Black friend in high school. You know, I've always been aligned with outliers. And in a predominantly white environment, anyone who looks different or is different is an outlier. Since the election, I made it my business to enlarge the sphere of my life, to pay Black professionals who add value to my life. And in coming into relationship, real, true relationship, not just a transactional relationship, I operate from a familial space. You know, I care to the degree that if we were walking down the street and your child was about to get hit by a car or a vigilante, I care in a familial way that I would put my body in front of your child, because that's the type of love I cultivate in the world. I'm not a hero. I'm a human who sees other humans for their value. And as sisters, your son is my nephew. You know, what I'm using in my voice, I've taken diversity classes. I've made it my business to learn my history. I have colonizers on both sides, original 13 colonizers in who I am descended from, to learn what colonization looks like in me, how I colonize spaces, how I override or try to insert myself. And in the study that I've done over the last several years, in having actual, real, true, intimate friendships with women of color, Hispanic women, I am able to, in some ways, be a bit of a spokesperson to the white people. You know, leave your Black sisters alone right now. They're at the funeral. You know,
What's your response to a Black woman that says, don't be my spokeswoman? You don't know, and you will never know what it's like to be a Black woman. If you have the sincerest intentions, what's your response?
I'm not speaking to what it's like to be a Black person.
Mm-hmm. So
I'm
your
speaking,
response is, okay. Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking to what it is like to be a Becky or a Karen. I'm speaking to my skin folk about how we perpetrate.
How do you define a Karen?
Well, you know, the meme is that they're calling the cops on Black people for being Black. And, you know, that is the grossest absence of knowledge of the system of white supremacy. It is an abuse of power. It is weaponizing your femininity. It is weaponizing your whiteness because you're scared, because someone as delightful as Lem is walking through the park.
Mm-hmm. And my question for you, Rebecca, and thank you for being so transparent. From the moment I met you, I, connected with your heart, but you really expanded my mind when we had our phone conversation. Are you friends with women who are not as conscious, or who may be the Karen who may weaponize? Have you been friends with women like that?
Less and less so, but using my voice on my social media platform, I have a fairly large following, and I am not afraid to correct. Mm-hmm. And that is something I've received training to do. I don't think everyone is, I think there's a bit of hysteria right now. I think there's a lot of brand new Joan of Arcs to the mission. And, you know, they want to swing bats and tell people how to be in this space. But I think just illuminating with kindness the error of someone's thinking and the facts associated with white supremacy and the facts associated with systemic racism is really how we begin to turn the tide, because people are oblivious.
Have you lost friendships recently, Rebecca?
I've curated my world pretty hardcore over the last several years. I think I shared yesterday that I'm divorced. You know, I had to go into my own grief bubble over the last couple of years, and I lost a lot of people. And so I'm fortunate that I have a lot of excellence of a very wide variety of people around me. So no, I haven't had to.
Thank you so much. What's the quote? Little but fierce. I don't know who's shorter, me or you. I can't remember. But
one.
You shorter than me? Oh, I don't know. I might have had on heels. So
the shorty's in the room, all reporting for duty.
A little bit fierce is what I get when I hear from you. And I just thank you for I don't know. I don't know if the word is, you're transparent and authentic, but it's something else. It's like you are willing to take some hard hits. That's a little different than someone just speaking about, I feel like you are willing to take some hard hits, have some hard conversations, be corrected,
Yes, that's
honor.
the most important thing,
Yeah.
Tiara.
Yeah.
I'm willing to be corrected.
Yeah. And Monique, when Monique shares and gives the language for honoring boundaries,
Hmm.
someone that doesn't just go into their hermit shell like I may unapologetically, right? Because I've hit rock bottom in my past. And
Hmm.
just when you rebuild from that space, you're not going to let yourself go back to that
Mm-mm.
space by your own doing. And so that's why what Monique was saying resonated so much. But for you to honor and recognize that process
Hmm.
is important, because some people are stepping up and they're speaking, but from a space that I'm not sure, if it's as authentic. Can you really honor when someone says, I don't want to talk about it right now? You're not
Hmm.
going to be, we don't need a hero. We don't need validation. We don't need the soothing. Just let me be. And that's one thing that I've seen you do repeatedly since we've connected. So thank you so much. Um, I'm
Thank
not
you,
a little
Tiara.
on fun size. I'm not little on fun size. You know what? We need a comedian in the group. I love it. Thank you. Guys, I'm sitting here in all transparency. Um, really like it's 9:29. And we have, I believe, 5 thought leaders left. So I'm thinking on my feet, like, if you all have a few extra minutes, I would like to continue. And if you need to log off, I would understand, but I do feel led to bring the voice of Lim into the conversation tonight. I think that's important. And then I do want to ask publicly if we can just prepare for an extra 15-20 minutes tomorrow night, per suggestion of our co-moderator. And I just want you guys to know that you will be hearing from me, because out of obedience, there are things coming up organically. This is not scripted. And I appreciate you all. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for sharing. That's Davidson with a D, guys. Davidson. Make sure you connect with her. Thank you. Lim.
Yes, yes, I am here. It took me a while to find the mute button.
I know, right? It's a lot to process. A lot being shared tonight. I need to get your permission specifically to continue the conversation beyond 9:30 tonight. Are we good?
I mean, we've opened a can. Let's go. Let's go all the
All
way.
right. Like, you know what? I'm going to ask you to just share right now what your authentic, raw thoughts are as you listen to three very transparent individuals.
I mean, I could just say wow. Like David, Monique, Rebecca, just wow. I want to start with David to say that you get it. I think he gets it. And if we're going to talk about how do we heal, we have to be willing to dismantle or deconstruct whiteness. And from the surface, it sounds really like whiteness. What are you talking about? And David, you get it because it is a social construct designed for social control, right? So when we talk about the law of 1687, when whiteness came about, you're talking about integrated marriages, and whiteness was created to give one class of people whose skin was different, control over another class because of Bacon's rebellion, because they saw that the connection on the ground, people who were poor in poverty, slave, indentured servants, were working together, was engaging together, was marrying together. And that led to this rebellion, and where they say, you know what, we need to create, we need to outlaw this integrated marriages. We need to actually create a class or a race called whiteness. And right now, we still we dismantling that. We still dealing with that problem from something that was created in 1687, right? So when David said, arguing with the nurse, I mean, to remove race, you get it. Because we didn't create this structure where there's a racial superiority and a racial inferiority. We was born into this process. So when we're talking about taking it to that next level, how do we dismantle whiteness? How do we dismantle this race construct in a way where we can actually become humans? Because I said the same thing to somebody earlier. What race are you? I'm human. Come to the human
Mhm.
race. But when
Mhm.
you begin to put it into these different classes and these different subjects and boxes, then it creates the I am better than you concept. I have privilege, you don't. I can now begin to design systems, and you get it when we talking about not the individual, it's the system. It was a
Mhm.
system that supported this police officer with his knee on that brother's neck. He knew he was getting away with that. It was a
Right.
system that Amy Cooper, that she can say, I am going to call and tell him that an African American man is threatening me. And Rebecca gets it when she said, you weaponize your whiteness because you know what that's going to do. You took advantage of that. And that is where the pain is. That is where people are now beginning to say enough. When all this took place, I said, I don't have any more words. And that's why I can relate to Monique when she said, I am not in a position to validate who you are right now. Right
Mhm.
now, I need to heal. Because the
Mhm.
truth be told, every father, every black father I knew, the rage is boiled over. And you was in the space of, do I get out there in Atlanta? Do I get on them streets and stand on that front line and use my body right now and be willing to take whatever punishment to make a statement? Or do I stay home and raise another generation of kids and make sure that my wife, my children, and the community that I support is in a space where we can continue to heal? So everybody was in this bipolar kind of mindset. And to David's point, we can't afford to be silent in these spaces. We have to allow ourselves to be heard. So I felt Monique when she said, I'm just not in that space. I have
Mm.
plenty of,
Mhm.
friends, white, black, however, it's the
Mhm.
construct, right? But plenty who reached out. It was like, look,
Mhm.
I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. And I don't have a response because I'm still processing the trauma. The wound is fresh. And if we're gonna at, if we're gonna heal, we need to acknowledge the wound. And we need to
Right.
acknowledge that there are some things that I don't want to say. There are some spaces that I want to go.
Mhm.
And Monique said something earlier about her son that I know where you're at. I know that feeling. The work that I've done, it's like we tell our children all the time, you're beautiful, you're awesome. Black is beautiful, brown is beautiful. Look at your complexion. But somehow, where were they able to see the subconscious of a child to make him or her see themselves as, I'm not black, I'm ugly. I hate my lips. I hate my nose. Where did that creep in at? Right? Did it creep in somewhere within the educational structure or the conditional chambers? Right? Where did it come in? And we talk about this one discussion we had with two young girls arguing. I mean, going crazy. Elementary, arguing about this color of this crayon. You had a whole box of 300 and something crayons, and they were both arguing over the pink crayon. And I was like, since y'all willing to argue about this one crayon, I need both of y'all to get the ugliest crayon in the box, and I need you to go in your corner and draw with it. One got black out, and the other one got brown out.
Mm.
Like, that is the ugliest crayon in the box to you? And I was like, look at your skin. And you can see her mind, like, no, like, you can see the confusion that was taking place. You can see her trying to process this. And when we're talking about dismantling, we're talking about dismantling something that is seated in the subconscious. So the work we do has to be deep. The work that we do have to be intentional, and the work we do have to be real.
Hmm. Y'all see why I love him. We met on the grounds of the University of Georgia. He would eat all my food I cooked on campus, guys. And so
Don't tell all my secrets now.
Okay. The whole dorm knew when I was cooking, but he really came down and would get a plate, and we would have some really powerful conversations. And for those who don't know, Life also has been very instrumental in the work that I'm beginning to do and connections I'm building in South Africa, because he lived there. He removed himself from, his environment and went to live in South Africa. And the conversations that we've had, they just open me up, and just raise my consciousness. And I'm on that journey. I'm still there. And I thank you so much for that, leading by example. Life is one of those people that know even more than what he shares, but I never feel uncomfortable in sharing what my truth is. And I appreciate that, because it's like listening to a child sometimes, and you're like, you haven't lived long enough yet, but you just let that child kind of be where they are in that space, and you plant some seeds, and you know that they'll grow over time. You do that so well, Life. But right now, there seems to be a greater sense of urgency. And when I spoke to you about it, we talk about these things have been happening for so long, but there does seem to be a sense of urgency or awareness. So, we're coming together to have the conversation. David tagged me in your spoken word that I've heard many moons ago. I feel led to ask you to recite it.
I mean, that's like a 5-minute piece. I mean, I'm down if y'all with
I
it.
feel led to hear it, for the world to hear it, because I had a conversation today, and I don't want to go into that conversation, but I want to share that someone that I respect, every time I spoke about the pain, about what's happening, she would share, well, if we're going to get upset about police brutality, we need to be just as upset about Black on Black crime. Every time I said that, that was the response. And I found myself getting frustrated, because I felt like we were using one conversation to distract from another conversation, which did not make one more valuable than the other.
They call
right?
that straw man argument,
Mm-hmm. And so, and this was a Black woman.
Mm.
And so that was hard to process, because every time I said, well, let's talk about this specific topic, it was, but look at, when we don't have 100 killings in Chicago, then we can have this other conversation. And I said to her, I said, let's take one of those young men who have done the shooting and killing. Let's go back to his reality of his home. Why do you think he has such rage inside of him? Just give me one reason why you think. We're not excusing the behavior, but we're going to talk about where that could be coming from. And she said, well, one of the main reasons that we see is that our young men are growing up without fathers. Mm. And I said, okay, so let's go. So if this young man, and I said, and what does that do? How does that create rage? She said, well, there's an identity issue. So now I think I'm more important and valuable by my possessions, by the car that I drive, because I don't have that father to validate me. And so the suppressed anger that I have and the expression is coming out in this way. And then what if the mother is a single mother raising him and working 3 jobs, and there is tension and what not going on in his reality? We're not excusing it, but then my question was, when you go back 400 years, because so she said to me, if a child is living in a hostile environment and they're processing all of this, that could explain the anger, right? So then it was, and I hear this often, But when we get grown and we know better, we do better. That was her response. No matter what your childhood, no matter if you were abused every night, no matter if you didn't have food to eat, no matter if your father was not there, when you become an adult, you're responsible for your decisions. And I hear that, right? And that was her response. And I said, do you really believe that everyone is positioned to get on their own 2 feet, no matter what that reality was for them? Initially, she said yes. And I said, so if someone has trauma, mental illness, Dr. Japonica teaches about how certain trauma can literally fragment and change your molecular structure. And this is how genes are passed on from your DNA. Does everyone really have the same opportunity when they become a certain age to know better and do better? So then that opened up, then her answer shifted a little bit. And she said, well, when we think about that group, so then what's the solution for that group? And I said, let's pick it up another day. But I was held at gunpoint by a young man and my heart broke. So I'm not having this conversation with rosy colored glasses. My heart broke because the same person that I love and out protesting for, I could see it and I understood it. I could understand it, but I'm like, it's the summertime. You might not even have food to eat when you get back home. My mind was able to process that. I said, if we were on a plantation together and we saw 100 people lynched, this is real talk today. If we were on a plantation together and we saw 100 people lynched and abused, and then we were set free after our voices were suppressed for how many years? What are we going to do together? Yeah. She said, well, I don't understand how we were stronger after slavery than we are now. That was the response, right? One of the responses. And it was just always like a rebuttal for the trauma not having an impact on the ability to really function from a space with the basic necessities. And so we talked about this conversation. If we were set free after years of that, where do we start? What are we doing? Are you saying that we have the same resources with all the trauma? Are we just going to ignore the trauma, the mental and emotional trauma, and go and build businesses? But then we did. You come together, you lean on each other when that's all you have. You feed each other's children, you figure it out. You build up businesses like what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it's burned to the ground. So my question is, when this happens, are we really saying that everybody is starting from the same point? Like, it just felt like that's what I was hearing, and I got frustrated because it's not true.
You can't even allow, I mean, you recognize that kind of behavior, right? And, you know, it's a kind of, it's a thought process that say, you know, we want to point to the Frankenstein. We want to point to the quote unquote monster without acknowledging the conditions that created the monster, right? Without acknowledging what are the historical realities that got us to this position. And usually to avoid, again, this is that what Monique talking about. These are draining conversations that you have internally, right? These are draining conversations that you have with people constantly, and you choose whether you can engage in that or are you ever going to penetrate through that mindset. So usually when I encourage and encounter those kind of people, I just say, what are you willing to do about it? What's your solution? Because we can we can constantly go, what's your solution? Are you helping to support organizations? Are you giving time? Are you giving your energy? Are you doing anything to be a part of the solution?
The solution that was given, and I did not feel drained. I don't equate being frustrated with drained. I'm not afraid to have the conversations. I like having them. You know, this is somebody that has it's not just a stranger to me. It just shocked me. But I will say to you and Monique's point tonight, one thing that I've taken away and I appreciate is that not everybody's ready to share.
Mm.
And I would be like, if you're being silent, then you're still part of the issue. That's not necessarily true. So I thank you all for sharing that, because, you know, you do want to honor where you are. And it's not just a white person not speaking up when they see what's wrong.
That's right.
You've given me a lot to even process, but her suggestion and the solution is that we've gotten away from God. We've gotten away from the church. And that's why we continue to be more divided. That's why the communities continue to fall apart. That's why the families and all of the crime is happening. That was the response. And so we'll jump into this, but we're going to close tonight with your spoken word. And I feel led to pause here, jump over to Valerie, let you get recentered. Okay. Jump over to Valerie. Valerie, kind of share what she's feeling, bring us into what the audience is feeling, and then we'll close with your spoken word for tonight. Val, how does that sound to you?
I just had a huge exhale. I'm really speechless. I mean, literally, there's so much that I'm consuming and absorbing and thinking and feeling. And Dave, Monique, Rebecca, Lem, just wow. And I'm thinking tomorrow with Tammy and Dr. Tong, Pastor Kim, and Leslie and Lessie. Whoa. But I am in awe. And I will say this, the social media audience is too. When we came to 9:30, Tierra, they said, no, keep going, keep going. And it's been on average 50 people, and they are hanging on and hanging in here. A lot of appreciation to Dave. Tanisha Carroll says, David, your transparency is refreshing and appreciated. Oh my gosh, it's just so much. Tierra, Rebecca, it has gotten a lot of responses for her openness and her transparency. Monique is saying, wow, Monique. Who said this? I know I saw this earlier, so please forgive me for not saying your name, but there was a woman who said, I've needed the language. I need the words to have these conversations. And when I'm ready, or even when I'm not ready. And so she was very appreciative of it. So Tierra, look, I have an old Tierra that came in for you because the audience is appreciating the beyond the surface, because that's what we're all so used to having, I would say collectively, right? Is the surface conversations. And so what's happening is, Tierra, through your facilitation of the conversation, you are really asking our thought leaders to go one level lower, go a little bit deeper, and it's resonating with the audience. They're saying, yes, that's me. Yes, that's me. I didn't know how to define it. I didn't know how to express it, but yes. So what they're seeing is reflections. That's what they're saying. They're seeing all of you as reflections of them. And we're giving them an opportunity to now take that step of courage when they're ready, Monique, to have the conversations. Yeah. So this is powerful. So, and yes, everyone is anxious now to hear Lem's point.
Valerie, thank you so much for that. And I'm holding back my emotions again. Because all of us are operating in obedience right now. And one thing that stands out for me with Monique, it says, I can't be ready because you're ready. That's the tweetable right there. I can't be ready because you're ready. And she didn't say this, but I'm like, when you think about, we've been living this for so many years. I think Monique gave me that language last night. She's like, Tierra, this is a space where years of emotions are now being given room to even come up, right? And so that language is so important. I hope that motivates each and every one of you beyond our 3 days together and invitations that you'll receive to continue to use your voice and share when you're ready, right? And accept the invitations that feel good. Don't accept it out of obligation, because we feel your heart when it feels good. And then there is really no right or wrong, because even if you call someone Black who wants to be called African American, you know, people have been sharing all this with me. Guess what? If your heart is good, guess what? You're going to still keep moving forward. And that's just what that person's preference is. But I thank you all so much for teaching me, guiding me, sharing with the audience. Someone put on social media yesterday that she is in a leadership space and needing to go into a very intentional space in the next week or so, and that us coming together is what she needed. She needed to see this. It's not about me. This is not about me, guys. This is about you and your heart and the authenticity to share your truth, to bring us into your mind and your heart. So I thank you so much for saying yes, because you didn't have to. This is a public forum. This is not a private boardroom. This is not your coffee table. Anyone in the world could see this. So this to me is you standing up and saying, I am who I say I am in all rooms. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. And I thank you. And on that note, Lem, we're going to turn it over to you. And when he's done, guys, we will close for the evening and we'll meet you back here. Same time, same place. On Facebook Live. I just ask that everyone share this out to your community and try to engage with those people when we're done, or tomorrow, whatever time you need to process. Lem, thank you so much. And we're going to turn it over to you.
Now, poetry is actually my love. Like, if you was to ask me, I would travel the world and just do poetry. However, we in real time. So I had to just kind of put that love to the side and really get engaged in the work that I do in these communities. But this is a piece that I wrote years ago, and I think it really focused on the micro and the macro systems. And when I was 13, my father would walk me through my 13th birthday. My father walked me through the streets of Brooklyn, New York, and we walked from project to project. And he was like, "Look at that," and he was just giving me the whole history of it. And he reminded me that I am going to be part of the problem, or I am going to be part of the solution. And as I got older, I started to see wherever I went, DC, Zimbabwe, South Africa, I saw the same sort of blueprint for the self-destruction, right? And so this is more than just a poem. This is a challenge. It's called Projects. Little Abe salutes his comrade and takes a bullet for his project. The kid that squeezed the trigger, he pulled it for his project. Now it's war between the kids and the projects. The city confiscate the land and corporations bid for the project. They start laying pipelines from the prison to the project, flooded with drugs, drain the vision out the project, put cameras on a post, wide fence around the projects. But still, I've seen an empty Coke bag lay beneath the bench of the project. On top, these kids sit, they're getting high in the projects. Throw the sets up, bandanas fly in the projects. Bullets were exchanged and mothers cry in the project. She said her son was born in a project. He died in a project. They call it social engineering in a project. Grandma got slapped by her grandson, but no one caring in the project. We take from each other. No more sharing in the projects. These words cry for change, but no one hearing in the project. Instead, we hear these dumb rappers throw knots to make it rain in the projects. And coppers tote Glocks left this black boy slain in the projects, where trappers saw rocks crack grain in the projects. This leaves little Abel as unable. It's too much Cain in the projects. Too many grown men mimic Lil Wayne in the projects. Too many flowers shaking their stems for fame in the projects. Pedophiles walk with no shame in the projects. Dogs roam these streets unchained in the projects. Rip roses from the earth. Young boys are running trains in the project. And worse are ministers who claim to be ordained in the projects, using the Lord's name in vain in the project. Hustle God with snake tongues and leave spiritual stains in the projects. Come on, 4 churches on 1 block, still nothing gained in the projects. But liquor stores, where they drown out their pain in the project. Crack house, where they empty out their veins in the projects. Slow genocide, slow genocide, slow genocide to nothing remain in the project. It's bioengineering in the project. Biological warfare is the project. Syphilis in Tuskegee was a project. Bombs dropped on Move in Philly was a project. Chemtrail clouds over our city is a
project.
Radiation in the soil is a
Project.
Fill the oceans with oil was a
Project.
Genetic modifying foods is a
Project.
Use frequencies to control your moods is a
Project.
COINTELPRO was a project. The CIA flood our hood with blow. It was a project. So crack in the hood was a
Project.
Birth of a nation. Even the Klan in White Hood was a
Project.
The prison complex is a
Project.
Housing complex is a
Project.
We call all these housing complex the
Project.
It's a new day. Let old scars peel from the projects. We want change. We gotta want to deal with our projects. Correct those that rob, rape, and steal in our projects, and those that hustle white death to kill a zeal in our projects. My father said, young boy, your hand is a deadly weapon, but could also be used to heal our projects. Plant good seeds, watch the harvest yield in the projects, learn to utilize the parks and the fields in our projects. Take back control, we gotta wield our project. Turn every man into an armor and a shield for the project is warfare. Become a righteous seal for this project. Aim high, push the moral will of the project. If black is beautiful, then let it be revealed in our projects. Let's start by giving back the lies and focus on what's real in our projects, like grow food so we provide the meal for the project. Eat healthy to eradicate the ills in our projects. Natural herbs in place of dietary pills in our projects. Try 3 days a week without salt as your
Project.
Bring your sugar intake to a halt as a
Project.
fast 2 weeks off Facebook as a
Project.
put you and your child's face inside a book as a
Project.
teach our sons chess and karate in a
Project.
let's teach our daughters self-esteem, self-love, and Pilates in the
Project.
take the television off, read more in the project. Open up your mind, see more than a project. Don't settle for a cell, be more than a
Project.
don't settle for a gel, be more than a
Project.
settle for your cells, be more than a
Project.
that's your challenge.
Wow.
Wow.
That's the challenge, right?
Love that. Love it.
I'm a poet, I'm an author, I have 2 books, and my poetry is my love. But I realized that we need more than words, we need action. So look at my resume, look at the work that I do, and let that speak for itself. But poetry is my love, and you can find a lot of the stuff in my books. And Destiny can, just give you all the details. But thank you so much, y'all.
Amazing. Amazing.
Wow.
Guys, I can't.
Wow.
Thank you, Lem. Thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. Guys, we're gonna take a break tonight, and we will meet tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much for being open. Thank you so much for saying yes. Good night.
Good night.
Night. Good night.